So I made VHelp. During this project, Microsoft, the company behind Windows and C++, helped a lot. Microsoft Learn is a great place to go and advance either F#, C#, C++ skills in Windows, especially if combined with creference.com for C++. But there is some design choices in there that makes you question the sanity of those guys in Microsoft. So for non-programmers, I describe a couple of terms so you guys have an idea what any term means. Variable. Imagine a box for specific items or values inside the programs. All values are saved into their respective variables, and variables are saved either in RAM or CPU cache. Vector or array. A variable that contains multiple values inside themselves instead of just one. Array or vector size. The amount of values that the variable or arrays is able to save. Argument. Inputs of any function. Return. Output of any function. Pointer. RAM address of a specific variable. Appellation. Filling a variable with a specific value. Calling. Using a function. Driver. A program that translates the language of your hardware to Windows so Windows know how to deal with that hardware. So that now you know the basic terms, let's get back to where we were. So in terms, I mentioned in C++ there is a big difference between arrays and vectors, and there is multiple vector types like a standard vector, a standard map, a standard DQ, non-organized map, etc. They have a big difference, but that is not needed for you guys. Just there is a big difference between arrays and vectors inside of C++. One of them is that arrays size should be constant, but vector size can be changed. Also, arrays are a bit more optimized for path processing. So why you guys need to know this? First, I need to introduce you guys to a variable type called char, which they contain one single character of English alphabet. So Microsoft had this design choice that for getting alphabetic values with functions, they get a pointer to a char array, then they fill that char array with the size of the values, and then functions return the size of those alphabetic values. Then you should fill another numeric variable with that size, which function have returned. And the crazy part is that Microsoft does this about alphabetic values that you don't have any idea what is the size of them, like address to the Windows 10 folder. What the fuck, Microsoft? How the fuck I supposed to know the size of the address to the Windows 10 folder so I can create a char array with that size so you can populate? Making these types of functions even more insane, they return the freaking size? So you can already know the fucking size. Just let me pass a pointer to freaking vector of char type as an argument instead of arrays, and you just resize the vector and populate it. How about that? So you guys ask how we programmers use these types of functions? This is how. We use a variable, pass a null pointer to that function, which is a pointer to no location in RAM, get the size in return, create an array with that size, call the function again, but this time we pass the pointer to that array instead of just passing a null pointer, and the function populates that array. Your operating systems are still functional. So this is one of the insanities that you see from Microsoft guys. What else is there? Well, reimplementation. When a code gets too old and other programmers are relying on that piece of code, you often need to update it in a way that does not alter how they use it, or re-implement it into another function that does it better, so those programmers' code just don't break. Especially when you have a giant operating system such as Windows. So for the functions that fill the purpose of filling alphabetic variables with specific things, like that getting keyboard keys name, for example, they have three different re-implemented versions. A normal version, which is the OG version, that populates the variable with the amounts of alphabets in ASCII table. Later on came the A version, which populates the variable with the amount of alphabets in ANSI table. And ultimately, later on came the W version of them, which populates variables with the amount of alphabets in Unicode table. All except getTempApp function, which gives you the address to the Windows temp folder. Now, instead of just having getTempApp, getTempApp A, getTempApp W, we have getTempApp2, getTempApp2A, getTempApp2W as well. And the difference between the version 1 and version 2 is none. They do the same return, do the same filling, same arguments. There's no difference. Feeling well, Microsoft? Another reimplementation that I hate, which is the reason that VHelp needs a reboot after installing it, is monitoring and changing keyboard input. First, we had low-level keyboard input process. Mouthful, I know. With this function introduced from Windows 1.0, there is no minimum requirement in Microsoft documentation, so I assume this is from Windows 1.0. Which this function splits between the driver and Windows. After the driver understood the message of the button, it gets past the low-level keyboard process, which you can decide what to do with it next. Low-level keyboard process was super slow and had the lack of telling you which device made the input. So they made a better version and implementation of it in Windows XP Service Pack 3 called the raw input. Raw input has a very different way of using it. It sits between the Windows operating system and the Windows messaging system that tells other programs like, hey, this button has been pressed. It is super fast and tells you the address of the device, which made the input perfect replacement for low-level keyboard process, right?
Right?
Well, it's true that it can do anything better than low-level keyboard process, but it doesn't do one thing: blocking the freaking key. So let me recap Microsoft. We implemented a function that was slow and garbage into a better function that does it better, but it just simply cannot blocking the key that the first function could do. We're still relevant, Microsoft. So, for blocking second keyboard keys, first I tried this. Get the key with low-level keyboard process. Use Windows messaging system to pass it to raw input. Raw input takes a look at its hardware address. If it's the second keyboard blocks, sends a message to low-level keyboard process to block it. If not the second keyboard, it sends a message to low-level keyboard process to pass the key. And low-level keyboard process was passing the key anyway.
Smash.
Why?
Smash.
With testing and figuring things out, I noticed that there was an update in Windows 10 that low-level keyboard process queues a message in Windows messaging system to pass it after you make the decision. So triggering Windows messaging system for passing message to raw input triggers that message to pass on, and Microsoft didn't absolutely tell anybody about it. So now you do the triggering and immediately pick the message that gets passed after it and throw it away. And then I realized existence of low-level keyboard process in making this decision making slows the whole operating system by 1.5 seconds at least. Without the correct decision making, by the way, back then I was just testing. It wasn't a really complicated decision making. It was either it was just passing to the raw input, and it was either the second keyboard and the key was blocked, or it wasn't, so the key was getting passed. That was all it was doing. Now the decision making is a lot. So instead of like the whole second keyboard engine is like 100, about 100 line, and 1/3 of it is just decision making. Because so you can pass multiple inputs, you can get multiple outputs, you can have different programs on same input, you can have pass to DirectX and non-DirectX programs differently. There is so many decision making in this process. Making the matters worse, if I was using low-level keyboard process and raw input, I should have making a queue system into the program, just in case if somehow keyboard low-level process and raw input got out of sync, which they do if you press a key too many times. You had one job, Microsoft, at implementing this function. One job. So how I do it now? There's a useful driver called interception that sits on top of keyboard and mouse driver, so you can control their input from another program, which is VHelp in this case. So VHelp installs this driver as well, and you need to reboot to load the driver. And then I had documentation problem. I usually don't have a problem with reading documentation, but sometimes in Microsoft it's on another level. One of them is get program icon function, which have got re-implemented into get image a function. Or is it? Well, the original documentation tells you that it is, and tells you that these files of Windows should be included in your code, so it recognizes the code, and it does. But it does not it's about its custom pre-made arguments by Microsoft. Digging a little bit into a Stack Overflow, you notice that you should define something so it recognizes those custom pre-made arguments, and it starts to recognize those related to standard Windows mouse icons, but not the program icon. And in the end, you notice this is not really re-implementation of get program icon function. Extract icon is re-implement of it. So you now wonder why documentation guided you like this as well. You know, there is no wonder that programs like to rely APIs and frameworks that have been built upon you instead of learning your own API and making programs with your own API. Right, Microsoft? You want me to add to this problem? Microsoft's self-redefinition of a standard and then screwing up at translating the very thing they made up. So this is like how your keyboard works. Each button have a number attached to it, which they're called a scan code, which is from 0 to 255, like 256 different amount of numbers. Like no keyboard have like 256 keys back in the standardization day. So not all 256 numbers are used in a scan code. Some are, and some are just not defined to any key. When you press a key, your keyboard sends the scan code of that key plus a binary 0 or 1 number representing if the key is being pressed or being released. So now Microsoft had these scan codes, and since so many of it values are empty, decides to fill them up for you, making themselves a new type of scan codes and values called the virtual key code, which you would expect since virtual key codes are based on scan codes, the values of a scan code is the same on virtual key codes, right? Right? Well, no, I don't know what scan codes are based on, but virtual key codes, alphabetic values, are not based on a scan code, and they mix with their own values like F24. The alphabetic values of virtual key codes are based on ASCII table, and you're like, what? So for example, value of PD in a scan code is equivalent to number pad 0 key in virtual key code. So they needed to add a dumb function just to translate your values to a scan code from virtual key codes, or from virtual key codes to a scan code, which doesn't work right, by the way. From translating from a scan code to virtual key code, it works perfectly fine. But from translating virtual key code to a scan code, it barely works, let alone working correctly. Now you wonder, at some point, Microsoft does stop messing up their own creation, right? Well, I wish you were satisfied with that, but no. Remember that directed shenanigans I explained in tutorial video? Well, for passing a keyboard key to a specific window, there is not much that you should do. Find a process, a window handle, find its thread handle, attach your own process to that process related to the thread handle, use the post message in Windows messaging system to message your keyboard key into that windows. Pretty simple and straightforward, except DirectX. DirectX completely ignores the post message, so now you should use that input to send the key into the whole operating system. So from the simulated key from operating system, DirectX recognizes the key you virtually pressed. Bravo, Microsoft, bravo! You did a great job at screwing your own software in any way possible. So yeah, this was technical description video of VHelp. Bye!